Well, hello, beautiful ones. I'm Stacy Murphy, the head Vixen of the Vixen Academy, and I want to welcome you here on my very special training, my four-part series training on From First Date to Forever. The 4 love goddess secrets that will guarantee to get you the man as well as the money. And today we are on lesson number 3, where I'm going to be talking about how you can always be on a man's mind, right? And specifically through the 4 key essence or the 4 key elements of mental seduction, all right? And some of this may surprise you when we get into what those 4 key elements are for mental seduction. It may kind of surprise you what they actually are, because there's always an assumption about what it is. I will tell you this, part of your assumption actually is included in there, but it's not everything, all right? And so for those of you who are new to me and new to my teaching, you can find out more about my work and what I do on the web at thevixenacademy.com. Again, that's thevixenacademy.com. And again, I have the great honor and distinction of working with professional women from all over the world, right? And I teach ladies how to feel strong, how to feel feminine, and also how to feel dynamic and seductive in the presence of men, right? And both life and love. And ladies, this is so that you can eloquently step into your queen status, which allows you to attract and maintain a juicy and joyful relationship with a high quality man who is your king. And together you can create an empire together. You can have your castle together that will stand the test of time. And that's what I have the great honor and distinction of doing. And I've been enjoying this series, which I said is the 4-part series that I'm doing, which is From First Date to Forever, and 4 love goddess secrets that guarantee to get the man as well as the money. And this is actually introductory teaching to my Love Goddess Mastery Program, all right? Something just, hold on one second here. Oh, there we go. Which is just an intro to my Love Goddess Mastery Program. And the group coaching program is going to be a launching of this on August 18th. And so with that, let's start to get ready and let's start to be able to always be in a man's mind, all right? So let's get going with this. All right, ladies. So I am gonna crank up the size so we can see it a lot better. There we go. All right. So the first thing I want to cover on this, hold on, I'm going to open up a little bit more just to make sure we can see everything that is here. All right. Here we go. There we go. All right, ladies. So the first thing, if you have your workbook in front of you, and like I said, if you don't have the workbook, when I send out the replay, you can go ahead and download the workbook there. So let's kind of turn to the very, very, very first page of this. And like I start all of my classes, the first thing I want you to focus on is mindset. Because mindset, like you've heard me say over and over again, your mind could be your greatest champion or it could be your worst enemy, okay? So here, we're going to be eliciting your mind every step of the way to be a champion and a cheerleader for you. So when we're talking about mental seduction, when we're talking about to always be on a man's mind, now, here's the other thing. This is also will help you in everyday life with people in general. Now, even though I'm focusing specifically on romantic and intimate relationships, this still works with men overall, even in a business or professional arena. It's just the tone of it is just toned down, all right? So what happens is, this is why I want you to know, it still will navigate and permeate in all areas of your life. So the mindset focus for this week is very first thing, how can I connect? Now, have you seen a trend so far in the first 3 lessons? Because when it comes to mindset, for every single one, the first thing is how can I connect? Starting from an emotional part, heart center, opening yourself up, opening your heart, all right? So how can I connect? The second thing that you're gonna be focusing on here, ladies, is how do I want to express myself, all right? How do I want to express myself? So here it would also come into, this would also include, so say for example, you're getting ready to go on a date. Or maybe you've been on several dates with this particular man and you've been going out now maybe for a couple of months. But still, whether it's the first date or it's a couple of months or even a couple of years, always kind of think when you're getting together with your man or with a man, how do you want to express yourself? Think of that first and even visualize how would you like to express yourself, which is something that I work with the ladies in Love Goddess through their Love Goddess persona, right? Through their Love Goddess persona, they have that visualization, right? They have that visualization, and then they can say, okay, how do I want to express myself when I'm in company with this gentleman? And you start to create that in your mind first, even before you see the person. All right. Then the next thing is, how do I want him to relate to me? Okay. How do I want him to relate to me? So this is also where you have some visioning that is going on. Okay. Some visioning of how you're like, okay, this is how I want to express myself. Now I'm visioning how he would relate to me. So you're just putting together a mental picture of how you would like to express yourself, how you'd like to connect with yourself. And that also is putting a seed and having the energy to put a seed and plant a seed in his head as well. All right. So in today's lesson, we're going to be covering the 4 pillars of love. Okay. Everyone should know this, and I call it the 4 pillars of love, and I'll explain to you more deeply what that entails. We're also going to be covering my man code formula, which is a secret to a man's commitment, as well as how to get a man to take you seriously. This is how to get anybody to take you seriously, but especially how to get a man to take you seriously. And I'm going to share with you why that is important. All right. Then we're also going to revisit the effective intimacy communication formula. Now, for those of you that were in lesson number 2, I did the deep dive, or more of a deep dive in lesson number 2 around that. So we're just going to revisit it very briefly in here in this lesson today. And then we're going to go into the building blocks of what I call the art of conversation and the 3 levels of conversation that, as a vixen and a love goddess, you'll be navigating through those 3 levels at various times in your relationship, right? And then also, I'm going to show you how the difference between how a vixen would communicate versus a girl next door. And this is where we're also going to be touching a little bit upon sabotaging behavior, all right? So I want you to definitely keep that in mind. And now, so far on this journey, we've gone through steps 1 through 4, right? So we talked about presence, confidence, people skills, and mesmerizing voice and communication. Now, in this week, in terms of the 4 keys of mental seduction, we are only going to be covering step number 5, which is mental seduction, because it is that important, it is that key in order to have a juicy relationship from day 1 to the very end of wherever you want that relationship to go for you. All right. And so let's go ahead and jump into that right now, because in the final lesson next week, we're going to be covering steps 6 and 7. So that's how we're going to round everything out over these 4 weeks. So let's now hop into step number 5. All right. So the step number 5, and going through mastering these love goddess secrets, is mental seduction. That's step number 5. Now, in business, it is actually called your presentation skills, right? So any of you that have to stand up and speak in front of anybody, do PowerPoints, like I always kind of tease, I was in like PowerPoint hell when I was in corporate, because I was doing one like every single week. You understand what I'm talking about. But when it comes to relationships, right? This is about mental seduction. I also call mental seduction putting those mental breadcrumbs in a person's head. Now, what do they say about breadcrumbs? People put breadcrumbs so it's a path that someone will follow, or a path so that if you're trying to return someplace, you won't get lost and you can find your way back, right? So here, I want you to think of mental seduction as you planting those mental breadcrumbs in a man's mind, all right? Now, the goal for this, ladies, is to connect, right? It is also to share, and it's to bond. right? Those are the three goals: to connect, to share, and to bond, right? Because when it comes to love, when you're able to be fully present with a man, he will pay more attention to you. And then I'm going to share with you the skills that are needed there from a body, mind, and heart perspective. Remember, because I want to round this out for you to understand and really start to embody this and a deeper level, right? Because this is both an inner game as well as an outer game. You work the two of them, linking them together to be that holistic and that complete package, right? So from a body perspective, in terms of the skill needed, and we actually talked about this in lesson number 2, body language. It's really paying attention to your body language. Just like I mentioned last week, men, their primary sense is sight. And communication, or should I say a majority or over 50% communication, is from body language. So this is why from the body language comes up again. Now, how to connect the mind, right? If you're familiar with the 5 love languages, that is how you can connect with the mind, right? Is through love languages. Now, if you're not familiar with the love languages, you can actually go ahead and Google that and just put in 5 love languages, Gary Chapman, and it will pull it up. And you can go ahead and take a quiz. It is a free quiz, so you can even know for yourself what your love languages are. Because my primary love language is physical touch, and my secondary love language is receiving gifts, right? And there are 5, so usually I always tell everyone, look at your primary and your secondary love language, right? And then to connect the heart now to everything else, the skill needed there is about embracing, how can I say this? Embracing acceptance, okay? And that would first be acceptance of yourself. So embracing self-acceptance. When you can embrace self-acceptance, that comes from self-love, that comes from self-worth. It's going to be way easier for you to accept other people. When you have a high degree of self-acceptance and self-love, it also makes you a less judgmental person, right? You're less judgmental. So there are so many beautiful cascading effects just by embracing acceptance. But the first thing is accepting yourself, all right? So here's where I want to share a little coaching moment from what I had shared when I was doing the PSAs, the public sexy announcements, about being present here in the presentation. So here's one of the feedback that I get from men all the time, and especially those when I'm working with them or coaching with them, or they're even a couple going back to the love languages. One of the things that men talk about, especially if quality time is one of their primary or secondary love language, which for a lot of men, quality time actually rates very high as a love language for a lot of men. And when that rates really high on a man's love language, this is the one thing I always hear over and over and over again. The man will say, when I am with her, I want her to be present. What that means is when we're talking, she's not checking her cell phone, right? When we are having a conversation, or maybe we're just sitting there cuddling, she's thinking about her to-do list, the dishes in the sink and what needs to go on. Or she wants to watch something on the news, or someone pinged her on her phone and she needs to check her messages. Men hate that. I will tell you right now, especially of quality time, because what is the one thing? You're not being present with them. And when it comes to mental seduction, the way you pull that off successfully is you have to be present. So let me take the example of what I talked about earlier with the PSAs, when teaching and people were on their phone having a conversation and how it distracted other people. Now think about it this way. If a man did that to you, how would you feel? And here's the other thing. The example that I gave here with the quality time, which was kind of ironic, where it just happened to work perfectly in what I was teaching. This is how the universe always gives you material to go on. What happens is, this is a prime example and fit perfectly into this point. If you're not present, how are you like that with other people that you're around? If you're not present, what are you communicating to other people. When you're not present to the experience that you're having, it doesn't matter who it is, a man, a woman, a coworker, a friend, it doesn't matter. When you are not present with them, here's the signal that you give out, that they're not important. That is the number one signal that you give out when you're not present, especially with a man, that he's not important. Other things are more important than being present in what it is that you're doing. And trust me, men can feel this, right? I always say men are like hound dogs. They can sniff out so many things. Men can pick this up instantaneously. And what happens is a lot of times it's a habit that ladies do. So this is what it is to be present, because look at how not being present was actually distracting towards other people. So that is the energy that creates, all right? And why it's really, really important to be present. So again, the skills needed here to link all of these together are body language, your love language, understanding what that is, and even more importantly, went too fast. Even more importantly is embracing your acceptance, embracing who you are and your self-love, all right? So now let's jump on over to the next page, all right? Now, here are the 4 pillars of love. Now, I call them the 4 pillars of love, right? And what happens is, think of these pillars as orbiting planets, right? And the love is in the middle. And can look at love as the sun, right? All of our planets in our universe revolve around the sun, right? So these 4 pillars of love really all encompass all of that juiciness that you want in the center, which is love, which is life force, which is juiciness, which is lumminess, right? And so here with the 4 pillars of love, when you are rocking these, it really addresses the top 3 reasons relationships fail. Right? Now, those top 3 reasons, this is according to research and data, not according to Stacy, right? According to research and data, the top 3 reasons relationships fail, the first one is incompatibility. And simply put, with incompatibility, it's about not understanding each other, not learning about each other. And also bad communication leads to incompatibility. So I always tell everyone this way, think of it this way. What happens is before you start a job, right? In most professions, you have to get some training before you started that job. You just didn't show up on someone's doorstep and say, give me a job, here I am. They're like, do you have the qualifications? Do you have the learning? Well, no, what did you do? Most of us either went to college, four-year university, trade school, maybe we were an apprentice under somebody else. But what happened? We got the education before we actually started that. Same thing with language, right? So I was born here in the States, so English is my primary language. So if English, is organic and natural, because that's the language we speak, our primary language anyway, we speak here in the States, because we speak a lot of languages here in the United States, but it's the primary language that we speak. If everything was so organic about it, why would we have to learn English or take English in school? They would just say, hey, you get that at home. There's no reason for you to take it here at school. But we still had to take English. We still had to take writing. At least back in the day when I went to school, we still had to do penmanship classes and things of that nature. So what happens, ladies, it's no different when it comes to relationships, right? And that, for some reason, seems to be where a lot of people kind of stop. Because I hear all the time, they say, well, I want it to be organic. All right. We can be organic around English as well, but we still had to learn the ins and outs of it. It's the same way when it comes to relationships. And I will tell you this, men are truly from Mars and women are truly from Venus. So what happens is you have to understand your Venetian energy, and then you have to understand the terrain of Mars to see how they both fit together, like that yin yang, like a puzzle, and how they complement each other. That's what this compatibility piece is talking about, all right? And then the second one is sex. And then the third is money, right? These are the top 3 reasons relationships fail. Now, I will tell you this in terms of with the sex and the money. If you are harboring any issues around sex and money, like with money, having a lack mentality, always feeling that you're broke and all things of that nature, it's best to heal those issues before you get into a relationship, because what happens is when you add another person into the mix, it just exacerbates anything that is going on. Just like having a child is not going to make a relationship stronger, right? That is not a reason to have a child. It'll actually put more strain in the relationship. This is the exact same thing I'm talking about here, all right? So let's look at these 4 pillars of love, which help you to navigate and dealing with these 3 top reasons that relationships fail, so you can actually empower yourself and it won't be an issue going into your relationships. So the first pillar of love is mental, all right? So by 1, put mental. The second pillar of love is emotional. The third pillar of love is physical. And then the fourth pillar of love is sexual, all right? So I'm going to repeat that again. And then here's another thing I want you to add to each of these, because it's kind of interesting how they kind of turned out. Pillar 1, which is mental, is an inner game. Pillar number 2, which is emotional, is also an inner game. Pillar number 3 is physical, which is an outer game. And pillar number 4, sexual, is also an outer game, right? And I'm talking about kind of where we traditionally kind of put these pillars in our life, right? So you'll notice 2 are inner and 2 are outer. Now, when it comes to, think of the 4 pillars of love like you're sitting on a chair, right? Like the chair you're probably sitting on right now, like the chair I'm sitting on right now. We've all sat on a 4-legged chair that's a bit wonky, right? And it kind of, when you sit on it, it kind of does one of these wibbly wobbly things, but you're still able to sit on it. So the 4 pillars of love act the very same way. The 4 pillars don't have to be in even balance at all times. They can be a little wonky and it will still work fine. Here's where you have to be careful. Just like with the leg of a chair, if one leg of a chair is totally broken, if you try to sit on it, what's going to happen? You will fall off. It's not going to support you. That is the same thing with the 4 pillars of love. If one of those pillars is broken, your relationship will not be able to sustain itself for a long period of time. Okay. And so that's why it's important to really navigate and heal whatever issues that you may have around all these. And this is what the training also is intended to do. Now, in that box and the top right corner that has a little pink band, right? This is what I want you to put here. These are the areas that are customarily a woman's comfort zone. Actually, 1 and 2, the mental and the emotional, are naturally or more likely a woman's comfort zone. That's there, all right? And then what happens is, because when it comes to that, estrogen is also the domain of the emotions. And estrogen, ladies, that's our primary hormone, is estrogen. That's how we can do backstrokes in our emotions, and we're so comfortable in going there very quickly. Now, ironically, the physical and the sexual, right, are customarily a man's comfort zone, right, which is also driven by testosterone, right? And men have, that's a man's primary hormone, is testosterone. And testosterone is also responsible for sex drive and arousal, and also the senses as well. So here I'm also introducing to you how this affects us biologically and why we do what we do, right? And when we can understand what is nature, which is our biology, and what is nurture, which is our environment, we're going to be less resistant to certain things and then more open to other things and understand even more on a deeper level, all right? Because we'll know what is nature versus what is nurture. Now, here's one of the things that I want to share with you here in these 4 pillars of love in our comfort zone. In order to have love that will stand the test of time, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Just like high quality men, if they want to have a relationship with a queen that will take them sailing into the sunset on their very last day of living, they also have to embrace the mental and emotional and come out of their comfort zone. All right. So high quality men are learning to do that just like you are learning to do this. Okay. So here I want you to just open up your mind when it comes to how are these four pillars of love showing up in your life? How are these four pillars of love showing up in your relationships? All right. And then here's how, and I want you to document that. That's something after this lesson, I want you to kind of think about that. What four pillars of love have you had the most challenges with? So say, for example, if you have major trust issues and you are afraid to trust people and you keep people at a distance, then the emotional bucket is also a pillar that is broken. All right. If you have sexual issues and inhibitions and you have a lot of resistance around that, then that pillar is broken. All right. So here's about doing a very honest self-assessment of where you are with the four pillars of love, primarily in your past relationships, so that you would know what you would need to shift and alter and evolve into moving forward so you can have successful relationships. And if you are currently in a relationship, so that relationship could be even better. All right, because it works out either way. And then here, I want you to put your thoughts down there. And then I also included in this workbook for you, like I said, this is coming out of my Love Goddess program, and I can answer some questions when we get to coaching and Q&A. Please, whatever questions that you have or coaching that you want to receive, write those down, even in the juicy thoughts area. That way, I can give you some laser coaching when we get to that section. But if you want to find out more about the Love Goddess program, and if you don't have the syllabus, you can click on that link, and then you'll be able to get all of the juicy details from there. All right. So what I want to do is I want you to see how the four pillars of love relate to the man code formula. Now, my man code formula is, like I said, this is a way to a man's commitment, right? And the path. And I like to call it the quality man GPS system is part of it and things of that nature. Because what happens when you use your GPS, we rely on our GPS so we can get to where we have to go, and we trust it, right? We trust it and we just follow what it's doing. So what happens is this formula is actually giving you the GPS signals to get to a man's commitment. Now, here is the top line version of this. I kind of truncated it just to make it in digestible pieces for today's lesson, but the actual formula is very specific that we can get into more details in Love Goddess. So the first thing, especially what we're going to be talking about deep here tonight, is that very first part of the man code formula, which is mind power. Because ladies, this is how, through the mind, that is how you can become a man's confidant, which I call his right-hand lady, all right? And you always want to be a man's confidant, because a confidant is someone that is to the other person, you will hear his deepest desires, his deepest wishes, as well as his fears and his apprehensions. He will be fully transparent with you. And that is the position of a confidant, which is what you definitely want to be in, right? It's the best possible place. And the action here is about getting into his head. And this is what we're going to be covering in this lesson today, because the key insight here is a man will take you seriously, right? He will take you seriously. I'm going to get into that in more detail, but let me kind of run through the rest of this formula. So when you have the mind power and you combine that with your feminine charm, where you're in your ravishing sex appeal, right? He will pursue you, right? So here's what's interesting. The mind power is an inner game. Your feminine charm, sex appeal is an outer game. So you see how it's balancing out, inner as well as outer. And I'm going to be talking about that because this is all about balance and being holistic. And this is also important to your authenticity. And then, like I said, he will pursue you, right? Because the key insight here is men crave seductive women because it appeals to their primal nature driven by their testosterone, right? And I just talked about that. And so you can see what is being triggered in a man just by actions. And this is all a science, sweetheart. This is all a science. And so you're just learning some of the things behind this science, right? So when we say it's organic, Here's what I would say to that. Underneath, now, even when you say organic and we go organic food, what happens is when we buy that organic food in a grocery store, the process to go about doing that was a science. There are certain things that they do use and don't use in order to have an organic product. It's the same way here, what you're doing in your relationships, right? So when you are rocking these first two pillars, right, which is the mind power, and the sex appeal is really leveraging on that sex pillar is what it's doing. Because here's one thing, sex appeal doesn't have anything to do with sexual intercourse, right? It is, sex appeal is about seduction. Sex appeal is about your sassiness. It's not sex, okay? But it would really navigate a little bit in touching into that sex pillar that's there, all right? Because when you're rocking these first two, it makes a man feel good about himself in your presence. And what happens is that's when the chemistry is starting to rock. And then there it's, he will crave you. He will crave you and he'll be thinking about you and he will want to experience that goodness over and over and over again, right? And here's what's also very important. High quality men want their equivalent, right? They want their equivalent, but a high quality man wants their equivalent wrapped in a feminine package, right? That's what high quality men want, okay? So this is why it's really important for you to love who you are and the essence of your energy and your femininity. So when you are rocking those first two pillars and a man is feeling good about himself in your presence, this is when it leads to the physical intimacy and what I call his kingdom. He lets you into his world. He lets you into what he's doing with his friends, what he's doing with his coworkers, his dreams and aspirations about life, and his castle. And I always tell the ladies, when you're dating somebody, when you're dating someone and you don't have to prompt this, and he says to you, hey babe, I'm gonna make some room in the bathroom for you so you can put some of your stuff here so you can just leave it since when you come by my place. You're golden. When a man makes room for you in his bathroom, you're golden. And you don't have to make any prompts or suggestions. He will actually do it on his own, which is what you want to happen in the first place, because that way you know it is genuine. That way you know it is something that he wants. Don't second guess it. Just keep moving forward, all right? So then with that, because by then you are his happy drug, and he will want to get your fix over and over. And then it literally leads to what I call the final frontier, okay? And I'm a Star Trek fan, so every now and then I'll swing those out there. And for men, that final frontier is the emotional connection, and that is his heart. And I want to pause here for a second, because many times, and this is where the good girl sabotages herself. When it comes to men, the reason why the emotional pillar is last, and not because they're less emotional, men just have a different route that they have to take in order to get to that point, and it's driven by their biology. And also, the reason why emotions are more in the forefront for women, like I said, is also driven by your biology. Now, think of it this way, since we're talking a little bit about biology. Ladies, you have 90% more estrogen in you than men do. And men have over 90% more testosterone than you do. Estrogen is what makes you a woman, even physically. Estrogen is responsible for your breast, your hips, and everything else. Just like testosterone is a man's physique, right? He has muscles, his height, his voice, all right? That's why they're so important to understand how they relate here. So because, ladies, you have 90% more estrogen than men do, men just have to, just put it this way, they have to go around the moon, the stars, and everything else to land to their emotions, right? Where you have a beeline to your emotions. Now think about it on the flip side. For most women, we have to go around the sun, the moon, and the stars to get comfortable in our sexual bliss, okay? So it's working for both, but in the opposite way. But when you can understand where it falls, you're going to be less apprehensive, and they'll have less anxiety in the road that needs to travel. Now, here's what's interesting. The Vixen and the Love Goddess, her formula is very similar to a man code formula, because a vixen, she wants to feel good about herself, and she's showing her sass appeal very early on, and she wants to see, okay, is he eye candy, and is he interesting for me, because she wants to feel good about herself when she's with this guy, right? So you see how they're kind of following. And everybody, whether you are the man code or what I call the vixen code or the good girl, everyone starts at the same place with the mental seduction and the mental power. That is important for everybody's level, whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. It's equally as important, which sometimes surprises a lot of women, because they feel, in terms of assumptions, that men are just thinking about sex. Now, sex is important. Sex is on the minds of a lot of men, and I'm not going to play that down, because that is true. However, it is not the driving force of a high quality man. And that's why I'm prefacing that with a high quality man. It's not the driving force. So if you do meet men, or you are in the company of men, and it seems like that's all they want to talk about and there's nothing else, then you know they're not a high quality man. Then you have the choice of saying goodbye and moving on, so that you can open yourself up to someone that will honor you, respect you, and cherish you. Okay. And so with all that, and so I just want to explain so you can understand that their emotions, it's not that they're not emotional, they don't want to, they just have to go a different route. So for most men, I get into this more deeply in my Man Mastery or Manifest Your Man, in terms of them to know and really understand what's going on emotionally with them. For a lot of men, it takes at least 6 months, 6 months, and some to even a year. And here's what I hear from a lot of men. Women want to know, how do you feel about me? Where's the relationship going? And after a couple of weeks, like 6 weeks, they want to know, or in 2 months, they want to know specifically. And a lot of men, they're like, I'm still getting to know you and figuring that out, right? And it specifically is because they have to go a different route to get to that point. So when a woman pushes it, that is sabotaging behavior. And then one of two things usually happens. Either one, he will lie to you because he doesn't want to have drama and just to move the conversation along. So he may lie to you so that you can be quiet, or they'll disappear and they'll leave because they're like, okay, this is just too much. And then they'll just go bye-bye and things of that nature. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, always. Nothing is ever 100%. So I'm just giving you the majority in terms of behavior and where it leads, all right? And so here's the other thing I want you also to pay attention to when it comes to commitment, okay? Commitment lives within. It is in the heart. Commitment is also demonstrated in the actions that men take to treat you, be with you, and also to be of service to you, right? Commitment is not about chasing the ring or running down the aisle, because you know what? That lasts for one day. And if you've ever talked to anybody that has ever gotten married, like especially if you've never been married before and you're a free agent, they will all tell you their wedding day was a blur. They get to relive their wedding day by the pictures that they see, but actually remembering the day was a blur, right? They couldn't even tell you if they ate or not and things of that nature. So what happens is that goes very quickly, but the nature and the context of your relationship and the commitment that a man has to you, it lives in the heart as well as the actions that he does, right? That is what true commitment is, right? So I wanted to share with that because that is the roadmap, the man code formula. That is the roadmap to a man's commitment. And now you know all of the juicy steps, how those 4 pillars of love feed into this. And now we are going to be focusing on pillar number 1, right? And so what I've said before in the other lessons, for any of you, if you want to have discussion with me to talk about whether the Love Goddess group coaching program is the right fit for you, because there are actually several different ways in which you can do the Love Goddess program with me. So if you want to have a chat with me, go ahead in this chat box here. If you can just type in there, just say Vixen, and also do it privately, just to me, not to everybody that is on here, because I also want you to include your number. That way, when I reach out to schedule our time to talk, that I make sure that you get it there. So put Vixen and your number, and then we'll be able to talk. So be able to do that. Like, again, the group is going to be starting on the 18th. Actually, 2 weeks from today is when the group starts. So I'm so looking forward to that. So let's hop on into this pillar number 4 with the mental seduction. All right, now here are a couple of things I want you to write down on the side area, because this is something I thought about afterwards, and I was like, oh, they can write it in. Here's what I want you to know why this is so important, right? There can be assumptions as to why that is. Why I clearly want you to say why this is important is for 2 specific reasons. It's very important for people to take you seriously because, 1, it's a respect issue. It is a respect issue. How, and then using the law of attraction, because that's what I teach very deeply in all of my training with all of my students. And now I'm calling it, also teaching them how to be a synchronicity detective, right? And the patterns. Just think of it this way. When it comes to respect, a way that you can embody that for yourself is being impeccable with your word. And impeccable with your word, if that's familiar to you, you know it's coming from the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? And again, that's called the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. If you don't have it, I definitely recommend that you get that. But one of those 4 agreements is being impeccable with your word. When you are impeccable with your word and you say what you're going to do and you do what you're going and you do what you say, what happens is this is your own honor code for yourself, your own self-respect, okay? So when other people take you seriously, they are respecting you. And that is what you want in any kind of relationship. Okay, but especially an intimate and a romantic relationship, especially someone that you want to spend, you know, for some of you, the rest of your life with, right? And so here's the second reason why it's important to be taken seriously. It's how you get what you want, right? That is how you get what you want in life. If someone doesn't take you seriously, how do you think you're going to get what you want in life? You're not. Okay, so that's the second reason why it's really important for you to be taken seriously, or why you want to be taken seriously, is how you get, that's how you get what you want. Okay, here's the other thing. So let's get into these 4 pillars or these 4 keys, and I'm actually going to do it in order, right? I'm going to do it in order of importance. Okay, so the first key of mental seduction is having a high value woman mindset, right? The first key in mental seduction, so right in that box over there, is having a high value woman mindset, right? And we actually covered some of, you know, the high value woman concepts in the first 2 lessons, but this is one of the keys to mental seduction. And then here's why, and this is what I want you to complete in that space over to the right. The reason why that is so key is because it makes a man curious to get to know you, right? When you're a high value woman mindset, you're confident in who you are. You own your worth. You own your voice, all right? And then when you are able to project that in your presence, when you're communicating with a man, it makes him curious to get to know you. He says to himself, man, I want to get to know what's underneath that hood of hers. And see, also listen to the language that I'm using, because this is how a man thinks. A hood, a car, right? And you know how men are with their cars, okay? And things of that nature. Some men even name their cars after women. And it's their beauty, their love, and everything else. So here with a high value woman, he wants to see what's underneath the hood in your brain. And he's curious to know what else is there, right? Here's the other thing. When you're on a man's mind, his mind then becomes preoccupied with thoughts of finding out more about you. He wants to get to know you because he's also assessing, how is she going to fit into my world? How is this going to flow? Right? Can we cruise it together? And he's making these decisions in his mind. But he's doing that because of the essence and the presence that you are projecting. So that's the first key to mental seduction, is having that high value woman mindset. The second thing to the mental seduction, or the second key, is knowing how men think, right? Knowing how men think is key number 2, because this is what a man then starts to think. He then says, you know what? She gets me. Now, here's the one thing. You're just learning, you're just getting to know him. But when you know how men think by certain things that you say or certain understandings that you have, even though you're just getting to know him, a man will still see that as comfort. Because he's like, I'm a man, and it seems like she can understand what's going on with us. So he immediately starts to relax. And when a man is relaxed, he will open and he will share more with you. All right? And I'll say that again. When a man is relaxed, he will actually open up more to you, and he will share more with you when he's relaxed, because his defenses are down, because he feels you can relate to him. Okay? That's why these first 2 things, these first 2 keys of mental seduction are so important. And if anything, speak volumes. And these first 2 keys also deal with the incompatibility piece that I talked about earlier, okay? Because when you know who you are, and then this is the planet of Venus, and when you know and understand men, which is Mars, it actually is the remedy, or what I say, the antidote to the first main reason why relationships fail, which is the incompatibility piece. So here you're starting to hum on a good fitting with each other from the very start. Now, if you're dating someone and you've been together for a while and communication is kind of wonky of what's going on, what happens is, I want you to pay even more attention to this lesson that's here, because you're going to be finding insight as to why that may be. All right, as to why that may be, so that you can start to evolve and shift a couple of things, so you can start having a different experience that's there. All right, so with that, here's the other thing. Now, key number 3 is, if you are rocking, right, and I always tell everyone this, if you are rocking key number 1 and key number 2, then by default, you're not going to step into this next one. Or should I say, key number 3 is eliminating sabotaging behavior. All right. So if you're rocking key number 1 and key number 2, then you will not step into sabotaging behavior. Right. So that's the third key of mental seduction, is eliminating your sabotaging behavior, because sabotaging behavior is what makes men run. Okay. Remember that sabotaging behavior is what makes men go bye-bye. Okay, and then they run for the hills, right? So that's key number 3. Now, here is key number 4, okay? Key number 4 is about being able to have intriguing conversation, right? And that is where the art of conversation comes in. And then the 3 levels that I'm going to be sharing with you in this training, and what those 3 levels are. So what happens is, key number 4 is rocking that, having fun with that. It also requires that you be comfortable in expressing yourself and expressing who you are, okay? So I'm going to run through those 4 very quickly right here. So key number 1 is having that high value woman mindset, all right? Key number 2 is about knowing how men think. Key number 3 is eliminating sabotaging behavior. And key number 4 is the art of conversation and having intriguing dialogue. All right, because with that last key, number 4, with the intriguing conversations, this is what draws a man closer into you, because he's reacting to your playfulness. He is reacting to your energy. He's also continuing with that, even more relaxed. he's also seeing, you know what, she is really down to earth. And I can really, relate to her, and I want to kick it with her, and I want to understand her a little bit more. So key number 4 is where your playfulness really comes out in a very sassy way. All right. And so let's kind of break down each of those keys a little bit more. All right. So we're going to kind of go into them in a little bit more of depth. And with the high value woman mindset, remember that was key number 1. Now, the secret ingredient, and there are 2 specific secret ingredients for the high value woman mindset, right? The first one is confidence. That's the first thing. And then you have to combine that with owning your voice, okay? Confidence and owning your voice. Now, in Love Goddess, as well as in earlier lessons in this series, right, we actually cover that in greater and deeper detail in module number 3, which is your high value woman qualities, right? It gets covered in there in the Love Goddess program. But what happens is those are, of all of those traits, those are the 2 that you're going to be rocking to really step into that high value woman mindset. And ironically, owning your voice is one of the biggest fears that women have, is expressing themselves. And here's a weird thing. Men have that fear too, but for a totally different reason, right? And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But what happens is confidence plus owning your voice. And when you do those 2 and you're humming those 2, that is when a man will take you seriously. Okay, that is when a man will take you seriously. That is when anybody will take you seriously, but especially a man. And here's the other thing. That is also how you get what you want. How you get what you want. Now, when we get into the training, even with some of my clients, we get into scripting, right? So about what to actually say, things of that nature. And because what happens is doing through scripting and through practicing, that is how you're going to get comfortable with expressing your voice and who you are, right? So I want you to hold on to those things, because you're also going to be seeing how certain things are repeating themselves and how they permeate throughout this entire transformation, right? Especially with those high value woman qualities. Now, when it comes to how men think, okay? And this is where I want to step into a little bit about sabotaging behavior. Okay, so here we're going to kind of look at key number 2 as well as key number 3, both at the same time here, and actually share with you the difference between how a vixen versus what I call the girl next door, right, will view these situations, especially how men think. Now, we're going to examine one of what I call the male inner truths. And, when we're in Love Goddess, there are actually 11 that we review, and we go over what those 11 are. But what I'm going to do is I'm sharing with you here this one, because it's actually pertinent to the lesson that we're talking about here today. So here is the male inner truth that I'm going to share with you here. So it is about, with men, this is an inner truth for them, about being inundated with endless communication drains men. It drains their energy. It just sucks everything out of them. And honestly, a lot of men, they are clueless and they don't understand what is all this heap of communication and endless communication that goes on. I even knew someone, a friend of mine, I even knew him, and his girlfriend at the time, they were together for 9 years and things of that nature. And, she's like, want to get married. And, they were living together, were together for 9 years. But I would witness some of the stuff that he would have to do. She would constantly FaceTime him. She would constantly WhatsApp him and all this other stuff. Almost, now this is an extreme, but almost like every 2 hours or something. And then I said to him, I said, dude, how do you deal with that? And he goes, I don't know. He's like, it drives me crazy. And no matter what I say to her, no matter what I do, no matter what I express, she is still constantly wants to know where I am all the time. And he goes, we've been together for 9 years. Listen to what I said. We've been together for 9 years. They're not together anymore because he couldn't deal with it and stuff like that. And so what happens is a lot of men feel this way. They're like, oh my gosh. And what happens is, here's the other thing for men. And here's a clue. When you're talking to a man and you see that glazed look on his face, like, you know, the glazed look, like doing one of these things, that means you've lost him in the conversation and he's not following you anymore. He sees your lips moving, but he's not registering what is coming out of your mouth because his brain is on overload, okay? Where if you were to do going from 0 to 60, you go to 0, women can go from 0 to 60 in a matter of 60 seconds. Well, in a matter of 60 seconds, men can go from 0 to 20 miles an hour, right? So you're way ahead of him. And so this is why they get lost in that. Now, here is what I call the female crazy making behavior, okay? And getting into sabotaging behavior. This is a woman that is constantly texting and calling because she wants to know from her man, what are you thinking about me? Do you love me? All this other stuff like that, constantly, right? So either she's constantly doing it and or she wants to get that from him as well, right? And here's and that's a sabotaging behavior. That is a behavior that makes men run, that makes men shut down. That also makes men ghost women as well, right? Not in all cases, but in some. Here's the foundation of that behavior. It's insecurity. That's the foundation of that behavior, is insecurity. That also lies in trust issues, or should I say lack of trust. So when there is lack of trust, you always need someone to validate their feelings because there isn't this solid trust that is there. That is what the inundation of texting and calling is coming from, which is a sabotaging behavior. Here's the other thing with how that foundation of insecurity and lack of trust. That is also the same energy that attracts to you a man that is not emotionally available, right? And we had talked about that in one of the previous lessons, right? So that also feeds into that energy. So if you've ever had the pattern of attracting unavailable men, meaning emotionally unavailable, or maybe even physically unavailable. You may say, well, what's a man who's physically unavailable? Okay, physically unavailable, you live in two totally different parts of the world. You live in 2 different states. And unfortunately, maybe he's married and you don't know about it, and maybe you do know about it. So that's a physical unavailability as well. Physically unavailable is a partner that has to take care of another relative, right? And so they're also bound to someone else. That is someone that's also physically unavailable. So unavailability can happen in many different ways, not just emotionally. It can happen physically as well as mentally as well, right? Mentally unavailable. And what that would even look like with mentally unavailable, somebody that doesn't want to go deep, right? Someone that doesn't want to deal with real issues or talk about deeper issues, and they're totally avoiding that. That's someone who's mentally unavailable as well, right? Now, that many times there is what the good girl will go through, and a lot of that also comes from conditioning, societal conditioning that says we have to do that, right? And we don't, right? Now, here's what a vixen knows and how a vixen would communicate and with that particular male inner truth. So for a vixen, she knows that a bit of mystery is a good thing for a man, right? A bit of mystery is actually good for men. And here's why. Because it goes back to those mental breadcrumbs. You are dropping those mental breadcrumbs. Because think about, you know, even with men, even with guys, men, they like a challenge, right? Remember I talked about men will appreciate what they have to work to get. okay? This is not being a hard nose or being cold or being aloof. That has nothing, because none of that is seductive, right? So it has nothing to do with that. But really laying those mental breadcrumbs. So when we get to the coaching part, we can probably, I can share with you in even more detail, you know, some examples of that and actually work with you on some examples of your own. But that is what's there. So there's a little bit of mystery, right? So you know what? Let me just throw this fun one in there just real quickly. One of the things that also that can be a contention in relationships. Oh, hey, babe, I want to go hang with the boys, right? So they want to hang with the boys. And what happens is men will say, oh my God, every single time I want to hang with my guys, my girl, she gives me a hard time. Where are you going? You know, where are you going? How long are you going to be? Who else is going to be there? Are there going to be any other girls that are going to be showing up? Okay, so some of you may understand this. And here's the other thing. Once we kind of get going, I can't check chat and things of that nature. So hopefully we'll get to that in a moment. So that's one of the things about, you know, guys going out and things of that nature. A good girl, or the typical thing, would be asking all those questions. Who are you going to be with? How long are you going to be gone? Da, 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 right? This is what a vixen will do. Oh, you're going out with the guys. You know what? Have a good time. You know, you know, anybody that I know that's going to be there with you? Oh, yeah, John's going to be there. Oh, tell John I said hello, blah, blah, blah. Have a good time. And you know what? Depending on what time you come back home, you may have a pleasant surprise waiting for you. Enjoy. And let them walk out the door and stuff like that, or whatever the case may be, right? And things of that nature. Now, then here's the second part, because there's a part 2 to that, right? And this is all part of Love Goddess training of how the sassiness you can step into. So here's the follow-up to that. When he's out with his boys, send him a text. But the text that you send is just a picture. No words need to be included. And I want you to think, why am I saying to you, you don't have to include any words and just include a picture? So the picture, and I want you to process that, because if you've been following the training, you know why I said that, okay? So you send a picture. So what kind of picture do you send? Well, you can send a picture of you sitting on the sofa or your favorite chair with a glass of your favorite beverage in your hand, and you could be wearing this very sassy or sexy outfit. And you can do that and send one picture there. And then you can send something like wink, wink, right? If you want to send some words, it would be more something playful and fun like that. And just go wink, wink. And then what happens is maybe, I don't know, half hour later, just send one more picture. But then this one may be a little bit more risque, okay? And then you can follow that. Oh, the goody and the trouble we can get into. But it depends on what my bedtime is, right? And that's all you say. That's it. I will tell you this, that one technique alone, guys, it has been great. I gotta go. Because will he pass up that opportunity with you, right? That is how a vixen will do that playfully. And then when he gets home, the two of you will have a good time. And he is in an amazing mood. You're in an amazing mood, and you're having a good time together. So he got what he wanted, you got what you wanted, and you're both happy together. That is what a win-win situation looks like, all right? So what I want you to have here, and this is part of what your love work is going to be, in this box right here, now if that sabotaging behavior has ever showed up in your life, how has it shown up in your relationships? And I want you to think about that, okay? How has that shown up in your relationships? Or any sabotaging behavior that you may have identified that you have, that you feel that you have, okay? Has it caused issues? What fears show up? Because usually it's a fear, it's always a fear that is behind a sabotaging behavior. a fear of loss, a fear of judgment, a fear of someone getting even on you, or whatever the case may be. Whatever that fear is, a fear is always behind a sabotaging behavior. So when you identify that sabotaging behavior, then I want you to think about what fear crops up in that with you specifically. That way you would know what you specifically need to address. And this is what we cover in dealing with, you know, especially with Get Unstuck, and dealing with fear, resistance, insecurity, and doubt. And there are 5 fear techniques that I teach. Many times this is what people do. They will focus on my man going out, and that is the problem. Now, for some of you, it actually may be the problem, especially if he's having the relationship with you as the second fiddle. Then yes, that's when it is a problem. But we're not talking about those specific situations, right? We're talking about your guy may want to go out with his boys once a month, something like that, which is perfectly fine. And if you're all in a tizzy around that, what happens is many times people try to control that event. I don't want him going out with the boys. And that really is not the issue. The true issue that needs to be healed is the insecurity and fear that gets triggered when your partner goes out. That is the true thing that needs to be healed, right? And so we examine that in a much deeper way, right? So let's move on now to the next session or section that I want to cover with you, all right? And here we're going to start revisiting a little bit of the effective intimacy communication formula. And like I said, for anybody that would like to have a talk with me outside of the lesson about Love Goddess and enrolling, just go ahead in the chat box here, just send to me privately, Vixen, and your phone number. And if for some reason you're not showing up on your actual name, please put your name in there as well, so I can clearly know who is communicating with me. So when we come now to this part of mental seduction, and with the effective intimacy communication, which I really went in more detail in lesson number 2. So I'm just kind of recapping it here. It's a 3-part formula. You focus on the feeling, the behavior, and the outcome. Now, here's why I'm bringing this back here. The effective intimacy communication, or that formula, is also the foundation for the art of conversation, okay? Because when you are developing and when you want to express yourself and whatever it is that you want to say, your needs, your wants, your desires, something yummy, even something frustrating, it's going to follow the same format, okay? And so that's why I have it here, because this is why I want all of you to embrace really learning to communicate effectively, because it feeds into that incompatibility piece, because usually that's predicated by bad communication. And this will actually get the two of you on the same page, and hopefully you're already reading out of the same book, right? And stuff like that. So this is where it comes in there. Now, with the art of conversation, what happens is there are 3 levels to the art of conversation. And there are 3 different, what I call feminine archetypes that it elicits, right? And there are different objectives with these 3 levels in the art of conversation, okay? Now, and also the art of conversation allows you to firmly stand in what I call your feminine radiance, your feminine genius, and you're doing it confidently, okay? So here's level number 1. Level number 1 is having charismatic conversations, okay? Charismatic conversations. Just like with the charisma, you can do this with anybody, anywhere, anytime, okay? Now, here's the archetype that's associated with that, the feminine archetype. This is the lady, okay? This is the lady, the right-hand lady. Now, if you were to think about a person, the person I thought about that that would be like the lady would be like Jennifer Aniston, for example, or even Oprah Winfrey and things like that. That would be like the lady, the charismatic archetype. Now, here's what's interesting about that. when it comes to this lady, and especially with Jennifer Aniston or even Oprah Winfrey, what happens is the good girl, or most women, that's what they want to be, right? Because it's in their comfort zone, right? If you know anything about Jennifer Aniston, she was always, you know, the good girl or the good one on Friends and things of that nature. So what happens is that is something where a lot of women say, oh, I want to be like that. Because for many and most women, that's because it stays within your comfort zone. And you can't expand, learn, and grow by staying in your comfort zone. You have to expand that so that you can experience more, okay? So what happens is that's where that is. Now, in terms of the objective for that, it's the foundation of any kind of conversation that you're having, right? It's the foundation. And it also is to connect, and the conversations there are very innocent. That's how come you can use it at any place, anywhere, anytime, on anyone, right? Because it's like those G-rated conversations is what I call it, anywhere, right? Now, here's level 2. You remember how I was talking to you and I shared with you, think of your charisma and seduction as a dimmer switch, right? That goes higher and lower, not an on and off switch. So what happens here when it comes to the levels of conversation, it's actually the same way. So level 2 is having seductive conversations, is level number 2. The archetype there is the temptress, right? That is the temptress. Now, when I thought of a person that can exemplify that, the person that came to mind was Angelina Jolie. I mean, that woman rocks, you know, in her sassiness. So Angelina Jolie, she would be like a quintessential temptress, right? And here's what's interesting in the difference between the Jennifer Aniston archetype and the Angelina with the lady and the temptress. Women may want to be like Jennifer Aniston, but men want Angelina Jolie. That is the difference. Men want the Angelina Jolie energy. And here's why. They want her energy because she is sassy. They want, and she shows she is confident. She, even in some of the roles that she takes, they're kick-ass women and things of that nature. But she still exemplifies her femininity. She has tattoos and all this other stuff, but she is still in her feminine power, right? And men find that electrifying and exciting. Now, you're not going to be like Angelina Jolie and Laura Croft swinging off of someplace like that, right? So what happens is they want a woman that has an interesting life, that has something to share, and who has the courage to be who she is and go after what she wants in life, right? So with the seductive, in terms of level of conversation, the objective for that one is to play, having colorful conversation. And this is what I call it tempting the tulips, right? So we're not tiptoeing through the tulips and things like that. We are tempting through the tulips is what we're doing for level 2 with the seductive. Now, the third level of conversation, we're turning up the intensity even more, right? So each level, you increase that intensity or the brightness. So the third level of conversation is the erotic conversation. And be honest, when I said about mental seduction, I'm almost positive that is the first place that everybody went to, or at least 9 out of 10 of you. Because when I ask people, okay, when I say mental seduction, what does that bring up in you? What do you think? And literally, poof, that is always the first thing that they say. Oh, it's about having erotic banter. I'm like, that's a part of it, but it's only a part. It is not the entire thing. So you're missing the boat on everything else that entails mental seduction, right? So for the female archetype with the erotic level is the freak in the bed, okay? So what happens is there's the lady in public and then there's the freak in the bed. So you have the charismatic all the way to the erotic and stuff like that. Now, when it came to an archetype there of who would that be? To me, the first thing I thought about was, you know, what are some of the latest porn stars, but you don't have to be a porn star. It can be It can be anyone who is open and who's engaging with their sexual expression. Not having sex, but their sexual expression. So for example, Josephine Baker, if those of you who know who Josephine Baker is, she will be quintessential and she would fit in that archetype. Just like Marilyn Monroe or Mae West. They actually may straddle between the seductive and the erotic kind of conversations in terms of archetype. So the reason why I share these archetypes with you is to help you picture in your mind, what it is that I'm sharing with you. Now, the objective for the erotic is to entice. It's to tease. It's to make a man hot and bothered, right? It is about being intensely passionate. Intensely passionate. So if you were to look at these 3 levels of conversation, what happens is charismatic is your G-rated kind of conversations. Your seductive is your PG and R-rated conversations. And your erotic are your R and your XXX conversations, right? So that's how they all layer in there. So one of the things I love for you to do in your love work, because I'm actually just verbally sharing your love work assignment on this one. The love work assignment that I have for you here is I would love for you to use the effective intimacy communication formula, right? And start to create some fun examples of how would you describe yourself being charismatic, being seductive, and then erotic, using those 3 levels of conversation, right? So using the effective intimacy communication formula to really kind of say, okay, you know what? How do I want to show up as a charismatic woman? I feel boom. How? I feel sassy. I feel sexy when I am what behavior? And then because when I'm doing that, here's the outcome that I enjoy, right? So I want you to do that for each of those levels of conversation and things like that. So you'll be very surprised. It's a very fun exercise that's there for you to do. Because here's the other thing. If you're feeling uncomfortable doing any one of these levels, you're projecting that energy to other people. You're actually projecting that energy to men, whether you're saying it or not, but people can feel it, which then in turn literally dictates how that experience and how that conversation experience or connection is going to go and stuff like that, right? This is like the unseen stuff. So here, this is where you're going to actually start to get comfortable playing around with this a little bit, right? And what I wanted to do that with you here. So in this lesson, I really hit upon these 4 areas that are covered very, very deeply in the Love Goddess program. So yet again, segment number 2, which is all about your Vixen confidence, because confidence is an aphrodisiac to both men and money, right? Number 3, your high value woman qualities, all right? We get into that more deeply. In segment number 6, that is where you will understand how men think, as you embrace also your high value woman mindset and you're eliminating the sabotaging behavior. So in that you learn what behavior or mindset to replace the sabotaging behavior with, all right? So to say, just go away, don't think that way, don't think, that doesn't work. You have to replace it with a new habit, all right? And then in segment number 9, the voice training. And then that's also where we get into more deeply in the art of conversation, where you learn how to compose and put together different types of dialogue. And we also cover how to handle sexual innuendo as well, because that is something that all women, we all handle that. Does it feel comfortable many times, or at least half the time? No, not really, especially if it's awkward or random coming out of nowhere. So even when it comes to the voice training and the conversation, the ladies in there, I give them scripts on how to handle sexual innuendo, where you can still stand in your feminine power and own your voice and erect boundaries, healthy boundaries, all at the same time, all right? So with that, everybody, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up things right now for laser coaching and Q&A. All right. And so let me go here and, right. So right now, I've just allowed anybody who wants to get laser coaching and they want to get coaching or ask me a question. So now I've just enabled it. So you're able to unmute yourself now for those that want to ask a question. Or now this is when I'm actually going to be going into chat right now. I'm going to look at chat. So the other thing would be go ahead and, or you can put your question or what you want to be coached on in the chat box, because that's what actually happened last week. Tons of people put stuff in chat. And so then I was just kind of following through what was in chat. Now here, I would assume that, because there are quite a few of you that are here on the line, that you would, let's kind of have some fun here and trying to practice and play with this, because this is one of the #1 skills that I hear from women all the time that they have a really hard time with. It's also dealing with sabotaging behavior. So here's a little bit thing. I'm assuming that it's not going to be quiet for the Q&A, and then we'll be able to hop into a lot of different things. And so while I'm waiting for people to queue in, to put in your question either in chat or you can unmute yourself. And so if you unmute yourself, just say your name and just, you know, what part of the world or the states that you're calling from, and then just get right into your question. And so I want to say thank you very much, Doreen, yes, for the examples that were there. Let me see. Okay, so someone asked here, what are examples of sabotaging behavior? All right, so I'm going to go into a couple examples. And before I even get into the examples of sabotaging behavior, I want to share something else that I had mentioned in the email prior to this lesson. I said in an email earlier, I think it was either yesterday or earlier today, that you got that I was going to be announcing those that are on the live call that you have the opportunity to receive something as part of the Love Goddess program. So what I've decided to do, because I had a lot of people that were interested in the series, what I decided to do is the next 10 ladies who actually joins the Love Goddess group program, they will actually receive my Spoiled Girlfriend training as their bonus. That is a bonus that I only give to my VIP clients. And what I decided to do is I will award that bonus to 10 ladies that actually sign on to Love Goddess by the end of this week. So there is a timing that's attached to this bonus and everything else. And for those of you, my Spoiled Girlfriend program is the art of receiving from men, right? And so this is where it's a great complement to the Love Goddess program, because this is focusing on you. With Spoiled Girlfriend, that's when you start to introduce the art of receiving from men. So we go a little bit deeper into different lifestyles that you can attract a high caliber man, right? So in Love Goddess, we're actually going to be looking at the business lifestyle that actually comes out of my Spoiled Girlfriend program. However, the Spoiled Girlfriend program also covers in more detail your social lifestyle and your romantic lifestyle and other little things about you up-leveling your circle of influence. So that is the bonus that the ladies who signed this week will actually be getting, and that'll be for 10 ladies that are there. And all of a sudden I see all of this, all this stuff coming through in chat. So let me scroll back to the beginning so I don't miss anyone. All right, so let's go back to Doreen's question about what are examples of sabotaging behavior. Well, I share two in this training. One is endless communication, constantly texting and calling. That is a sabotaging behavior. Another sabotaging behavior that I also mentioned here tonight is when guys want to go out with their guy friends, women have an issue with that. That's another sabotaging behavior. But here is another sabotaging behavior I want to share with you. Not saying what you want and expecting a man to read your mind. That's sabotaging behavior number one, right there, is expecting a man to read your mind. Now, what happens is when I got earlier where I said men like a little bit of mystery, right? That's different about not expressing what's on your mind, okay? One is those mental breadcrumbs. Even like that example that I gave you when he goes out with the boys. That's a little bit of mystery that's there because you keep his mind curious and occupied in a positive way, right? But what happens is, I've heard many, many, many women say this, especially when it comes to intimacy. Well, if I tell him what I want, it's going to kill it for me. Okay, granted, you don't want to be prescriptive with telling a man, okay, tweak this, touch this, massage this, do this, right? Because what's yummy about that? It's like an owner's manual, right? Trying to do things. So yes, that don't do there. But what happens is when a man is like, okay, what do you like, especially intimately? What happens is using the effective intimacy communication, you can actually communicate that to a man, which then he will go, okay, now I have some ideas and thoughts. And then he will go and run with it. He will just run with it. And here's the other thing. Effective intimacy communication is also how you can get what you want. Here's another example that I use sometimes. And this is communicating, and this is killing a couple of birds with the same stone. And I may have shared this story before, but if I did, I'm repeating myself. If not, hey, it's a new story. I remember when, I think I had shared, I was going on a cruise, actually a business cruise. It wasn't a pleasurable one, it was a business one. And Mike and I went to buy some shoes at Nordstrom Rack and all this other stuff. And I went to get sandals because I always wear heels and I didn't have any sandals. So we went there to look for sandals. But when we were there, he kept pointing and he had these shoes, these orange suede heel shoes. And he kept showing, I said, babe, those aren't sandals. I'm looking for sandals. And he kept going, oh, well, you know, these are, oh my God, these are just so nice. And da 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 da. And what happened? But he held the shoes in his hand and he would not diverge from those shoes. So this is what I said to him. I said, well, you know what? You can always gift me the shoes because you love them so much, and I will model them for you. Now, mind you, these shoes were originally $200 and some. They were on sale at Nordstrom for about, I think, $90 something or whatever. And when I said that to him, that's all I said. I said, you know, you love them so much, you can always gift them, and I will model them for you. That's all I said. To which he took the shoes and went straight to the checkout to buy those shoes and stuff. So then when I was like, well, I can't find any sandals that I like. So I went to the front. So I met him up there. He had already paid for the shoes. And he's like, okay, come on, let's go. I'm like, why, you know? And he goes, when I got to the register and the guy put the shoes in, they came up for 20 some odd dollars. And both him and the guy looked at each other. He's like, well, yeah, it says this price here, but in the system, he goes, well, I'll give it to you what's in the system. So what happens is the man, we beelined out of there. He goes, yeah, let's just leave. But what happens is that is how you can get what you want right there. That's another example of using conversation in a way that is not nagging. And then what do you think I did? When we got back to my place, I put the shoes on and I started walking around and I was modeling it for him and stuff like that. And he was like, oh my God, they're so pretty. I'm like, yep, I know. And they're beautiful, right? But that is how you use the conversation, okay? But that's also going into the sabotaging behavior about not telling a man what you want, right? So that was one way in which I expressed that. And so we get into way more of the sabotaging behaviors in Love Goddess and really turning those around. But you can know if something is a sabotaging behavior in your own relationships. Look at the pattern. Look at the pattern that is in your relationship. Remember, a pattern is if it happens 3 times or more, that constitutes a pattern. Okay, so just look at your patterns in your relationship, and then that can actually tell you where your sabotaging behavior is. All right, so wanted to share that one. So thank you, Doreen, for that. Okay, so someone else here said, what is the archetype of erotic conversation? So I gave 2. One was Josephine Baker, right? And then the other one would be like a Mae West, for example, or like a Marilyn Monroe kind of deal, right? Those would be 2 examples. Now, here's what's interesting in Love Goddess, especially when we're doing the high value woman qualities, I actually give the ladies examples of characters, movies, and shows that I have them watch so they can actually see a high value woman in action, right? See a high value woman in action. A woman that balances her power, her essence, her individuality, her thoughts, and is a go-getter, and she balances that with her feminine radiance. And many times we don't see or realize examples. And so that's why I provide those examples. So you can have a picture, you're like, oh, okay, now I know what this is. Okay, now I'm gonna create it uniquely for myself. Okay, creating it uniquely for myself and stuff. So those would be the archetypes that I would give there. Now, here's also something that's interesting. I also refer to in terms of there are 3 seductress archetypes that exist, right? And there may be more than 3, but there are 3 that I really land on, which is embedded all in Love Goddess. And I'm going to share those 3 that are here. If you want to look them up a little bit more, Google them, you can. So the first one would be the geisha, okay? And that is traditionally coming from Japan, right, is the geisha. Geisha would also be in alignment with charismatic conversation or that charismatic level that's there. What a lot of people misunderstand, they think geishas were prostitutes, and they're not. They didn't have sex with any of the men. What happens is they are masters, right, or mistresses of the feminine arts and feminine graces, right? They were trained for years in different subject matters. Right now, here's what's interesting. Remember last week when we were talking where someone's like, well, why does it seem like we have to do all this stuff now and we don't remember it being like this, long ago? That's not true. Like I had said, our mothers and grandmothers used to teach it to us, but they also have very long-standing traditions in various countries of the feminine arts. And in Asia and in Japan specifically, it was the geisha. So these women they knew about politics, they knew about money, they knew about current events. They also knew how to poetry, right? How to sing or dance or play an instrument, whatever their natural talent was. So if their voice couldn't carry a tune, they weren't learning how to sing, but maybe they were good at poetry, or maybe they were good at dancing. So, because that's my seductress skill, is actually dance, right? And I always tell all my love goddesses, lock in on one skill or ability or talent that you have and take it to the next level, okay? So on that charismatic level, that would be like the geisha. The next level I want to talk about is the courtesan. Courtesans were more European. And courtesans were women that did have sex with the men that they entertained, okay? And so, but the courtesans, they were very business strategic. And so that's why they were actually with a lot of high rollers, because they knew about politics. They knew how to have a conversation with influential men about politics, about money, about business. But what happens here is these men consider these courtesans as their confidant. So they would tell them secrets that they would not tell other people. And so what happens is the courtesan would be in that seductive realm, right? And she can also go into the erotic as well, because you know what, she did have sex with the men they were with, but they were having relationships. But it was a relationship that was built on an agreement, all right? They were having a relationship, but it was built on a mutual agreement that was there. And then the last seductress archetype that is infused in my coaching, what I do, are the dakinis, right? Or the dakinis or the tantrikas. And that is more of an East Indian modality, right? That is there. And also there's Tantra also in the Buddhist tradition as well as the Hindu tradition. That's where this actually comes from, right? And so dakinis, and if it's a man, he's called a daka. And if it's a woman, she's called a dakini, right? And these are also people that are trained in the intimate and the erotic arts, but they are also, just like with the geisha, these women are trained in a specific skill, okay? And so like when I'm working with couples, especially specifically, you know, I take them through a tantric sensory foreplay experience, right? And so I teach them how to do that. But this is something that if it's a dakini, she would do to a man. If it's a man, a daka would do to a woman. But then obviously if you're with your partner, you do it together to each other. But those are those skills that I teach. And with tantrikas and with dakas and dakinis, there's an element of spirituality that is infused in there. Unlike the other two archetypes where there is not, in this one, there is spirituality. So it really, because it's leveraging on tantra and sacred sexuality, where everything is the sacred thing. And so dakas, dakinis, and tantrikas, they would be more in that erotic, right, in terms of archetype there. So those are three classic archetypes of feminine presence and seduction, how people may traditionally think of it, right? But these are things coming from other modalities and things like that, or should I, not modalities, but other countries and other systems and stuff like that. So that's why I wanted to add into that. Let's see, now I'm going to go through the rest of these. Okay, so what happens is Nadia from England, thank you for, goodness girl, you're piping in from England, the time over there right now, so that's true dedication. And thank you so much. So and hopefully I pronounced your name correctly, but what happens is I will contact you later this week so we can powwow there with your question. All right, so here's another question. Okay, so this is from Marie. How does one seduce a man who is a workaholic? Or should a woman run away from a man like that? All right. There are multiple parts, or should I say, to answer that question, there are multiple layers to answering that question. Here's the one thing. The first thing I want you to do is examine, why is he a workaholic? Because it also depends on where he is in his life. And let me explain that. Say, for example, you are with a high quality man and he is in residency to be a doctor or any kind of medical, medical professional. He's going to be working more than you will be seeing him, because that is what is demanded of that job and that point in his life. And a lot of people know if they're going to be marrying someone or they're going to be dating someone or whatever, and he's in the medical field or in the legal field, right? And I can even, no, because he's not a workaholic. Mike's not a workaholic, but he had a totally different schedule. But like if you're in certain fields, what happens is at certain times, their job and what they do is their profession is going to command their time. So because of that, I always say with ladies, the women that are the most successful in those types of relationships, even the setup that I had with Mike, right? Because Mike, he travels for what he does. Monday through Friday, he's usually traveling, right? Because he's a mechanical engineer. So he has to go out there and do that stuff. He's home on the weekends, right? And then what happens is there's some women that could not deal with that. So in situations like this, what's important for the woman is she needs to have her own life. She needs to have her circle of friends so that she doesn't feel like second fiddle, right? And so that's why I said there are different layers to this, because that is one type of situation. And it's one of those things where it's then going to be up to you of, are you going to be patient enough to get through that point so that you can enjoy the benefits as to why they're a workaholic at this time, right? So that's one thing. Here's the other part. The other part is the higher you go in corporate or owning your own business or owning your own company, right? If they do not delegate well and they don't have a team underneath them that they trust, they will be a workaholic just from the position that they have, okay? So when it comes to situations like that, it's the same advice for someone that's going through residency or law school and things of that nature. You need to make sure you have your own independent life that makes you happy, and you're not looking to your partner to complete things for you, all right? So those are those types of situations. Here is the last bucket. He's a workaholic because he wants to avoid, being a workaholic to avoid issues. That is where leave. That would be the one where you just need to move on. Because here's one thing. A person that is a workaholic, many times they are like that because they are covering up something that they're afraid of or they don't want to change. A workaholic is no different. And when I say workaholic, I'm talking, because workaholism is actually, it can be a medical condition, a mental condition. Just like someone is a sex addict, just like someone is a shopaholic, or any of those things. Many times we get into these habits as a coping mechanism because we want to avoid something else. So if that is the case, and the man is a workaholic because he's using it as avoidance, what happens is he has to come to that realization and that change on his own. He has to also realize that he's covering up for whatever issues are going on in his life. And if he doesn't want to acknowledge that, if he doesn't want to own up to that or fess up to that, nothing you can do is going to change that. You will be exhausted and you will feel depleted and you'll feel unimportant. So this is why it's like that's one of those things. If you saw my video on YouTube, do you love them or leave them? Go back to that video, to then determine whether you love them or whether you leave them. But that's why I said there are different layers to that question, because not all workaholics are the same. Some are for a period of time, and they're like that for a period of time because of what they have to do. Some are because of their position, but then others, they use it as avoidance. So you're the only one that can answer where that's playing there, but at least you have a couple of different ways to slice it and dice it, all right? So let's see here. Okay, I'm trying to scroll back up so I can catch, okay, one of the questions was the Love Goddess program have a pay plan? Yes, it does. All right, and there are 3 different ways to do Love Goddess. There is one-on-one with me, there is in group, which I'm bringing back, and then there's also home study. And a dear, a tribe member, she's been in my tribe for a while, and she said, and I only found this out today. She said, I have been waiting for you to do the Love Goddess program again. She goes, I've been checking your website to see when you bring it back. And guess what? She's doing it. So what happens is that's how much people are waiting for it. So yes, there is a play plan on no matter which way you would like to do it and stuff like that. All righty. So let's see here. Thank you, Faye, for sending over your info. All right. So someone said here, okay, I'm gonna read this one because it went out to everyone, but let me read it. Dating a medical professional who got a job as an area director for the East Coast, right? So he has put our relationship on pause, and he said he will date me later on if I am not dating someone. I said I will not date him because he abandoned me after 6 months of dating. Did I sabotage? The quick answer, no. That's the simple answer. No, you didn't sabotage. Let me explain. There are a couple of things in there, and this is a good example. So thank you so much, Faye, for putting that in there. And let me just break that down. So a couple of you can do this. And we're already at going on 9 p.m. my time where I'm at. So this probably will be the last question that I'll take. There were more, but this is what I'll be able to go through. So let me break that down for you. It's kind of interesting that I gave that example about the workaholics with if it's medical, because I didn't even see this question that was there. So ironically, it kind of showed the point that I just talked about with somewhat Doreen's about workaholics, okay? So you can see how that played out. Here's the one thing that men will do, and it's up to ladies to make that decision. When it was here, he put our relationship on pause, and he said, we will date later if I'm not dating someone. That right there shows a man that's not committed. That's the one thing, a man that's not committed. But there is a but. When men are so focused in a very important project, job, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's extremely vital in his life. Everything gets put on the back burner. Everything. Even if he's building a house and the house he's building is for the two of you, he will be zoned in. Because here's one thing, men are very focused. They look in front of them. Women are like, right? Going in all kinds of directions, right? And this is why they say, women can multitask like a mofo, right? And it's because that's how our brain operates, driven also by our estrogen, right? So our brain goes like this, and men, they're straight ahead, okay? So men don't multitask like women do. And it's a joke, right? We all heard about it. We all know about it, right? But that's why, because the way men process, the way they think, they're laser focused on this. Now, that is any man who has something extremely important that they're dealing with in their life. And they can't handle more than one life-changing thing at the same time. Some men will say, I'm doing this out of respect for you because I won't be able to devote enough time to our relationship, okay? So one, you have to respect him because he was honest. That you have to do. You have to, and when a man says something like this, he means it. A lot of women go, well, maybe I'll change his mind. No. When a man says this, he means it, right? So you have to take it at face value. And he was honest with you, which is commendable, right? He was honest, which is commendable, because some would lie, right? Now, here's how he could have handled this differently, or if he was this type of high quality man, that could deal with more than one important thing in his life, okay? So it would be something like this. He would, because he said on director for East Coast, so I don't know if he has to move there for it, or because it may be a different territory than where he's at right now, so he may end up traveling more. Maybe that's also what it is. So this is what some men will do, especially high value men. They can juggle more than one ball at the same time. What they will say is, I'm really focused in this massive opportunity that I have going on, but our relationship is also just as equally important to me. This is also where you use the effective intimacy communication in your dialogue with the man. And so you would say, you know, and here's, okay, let me do this. This is how you know it's live. And let me kind of turn this around on the other side. I hear and I understand that okay, you have this great opportunity and I'm so excited for you. I'm happy that you have this great opportunity that's coming forth and your time may be stretched. And I know how, you know, with men, when they're really laser focused on things, that can consume their entire world. So what I would love is, why don't we think of some ways that, you know, allows you, one, to stay focused on this great opportunity that you have, and at the same time, still nurture what we are growing and developing on. And so let's kind of talk about that. So like, you know, I know that you're going to be traveling now for this job, you know, let's just say randomly, 2 weeks out of the month, you're going to be traveling for this job over to the East Coast. So what we can do is, I know you're going to be focused on those things and what you have building. So, you know, when you're in town or you get back, why don't we just have a standing, you know, date or weekend and have a dedicated weekend once a week. And then the other times when you're back, we get together for, you know, dinner or escapade or whatever the case may be. It's like, we're just brainstorming here. It was like, what are your thoughts about that? Literally, I just used an example of the effective intimacy communication to deal exactly with that particular issue that was there, to open up the conversation of how to navigate that, right? Now, if he can always come back and say, no, I can't do that, fine, then he can't do it. You have your answer. And then there, it's like, you know, he's not as invested. Because if he were, he would find a way to maintain connection, especially if you've been together for 6 months and things of that nature. He'll find a way. And then you remember when I said earlier, most men, sometimes they take 6 months to a year to kind of figure out, you know, where they are in the emotional thing. Here we go. This is another example of that. So what happens is this is why it's so important for you ladies, not only to know yourself, but also to understand men. And this is why I start the introduction in Love Goddess, specifically around sabotaging behavior. So no, you did not sabotage, but I also gave you some additional insight of how you can handle that and do that for the moving forward. And then there was another part to this. Okay, so he said when he comes home on the weekends, he has to spend days with his daughters. Okay, so the older you get, people come with their past life, which may, like I have a daughter, okay? My daughter's 23 years old. She just turned 23 like 2 weeks ago, right? So when I was opening myself up, one of the things, and this is more covered in Manifest Your Man and Man Mastery because you work on a blueprint. But I said in there, in the social quadrant, if he has children, his children get along with me, his children get along with my children. And if he has children, what happens is we all can coexist very well in the relationship. So he doesn't have to think it's them versus me. The only area where this gets a little bit dicey is if his kids are young. And when I say young, I'm talking elementary school age and younger, right? When the kids are a little bit older, they start having their own life and they're like, Mom and Dad, see ya, we have our own life. Then that's when the parents are like, okay, we have our life now because they're off doing their own thing, and you turn into mom or dad taxi is what you get turned into and stuff. But if they're younger, they're going to be more reliant on their parents, where that situation comes up. So even in those situations, many times I always recommend, if you have kids or if they have kids, wait 6 months minimum before you were to introduce them to your children, right? Because what happens is anybody you introduce to your kids or they introduce you to their children, you don't want to introduce every single person because you know what that kind of creates in a person's mind. You only want to introduce them to people that you feel are going to be around, all right? It's also for their well-being emotionally as well as mentally, okay? And stuff like that. So I always say wait till at least 6 months, right? So from there, so you have to find the age. Like say, for example, if they are younger, as to why he says he has to spend time with his daughters. All right, what happens is, here's a question I have for you. Does it feel like he's always giving some excuse or reason as to why he cannot spend time with you? When a man does that, it means he's not vested, okay? And if he's not vested, then what happens is, and look at the thing he said here, if you are not dating someone, okay, dating does not indicate exclusivity. And it surprises people when I say that, when I tell them that. Dating does not mean exclusivity. Dating is just that. You're dating people to get to know them, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend is where you start having exclusivity, which then goes into significant other, which then elevates into, you know, husband or life partner, okay? Because there are several, and then I added on a 7th layer, which is now intimate companionship. There are different layers on the relationship ladder. Dating does not indicate exclusivity. So what he said was, you are free to date other people. And if you're not dating anyone, and everything with him has calmed down, then he can vest time in the relationship. But here's something you will have to think about afterwards. If he did it this time, in the back of your head, you're going to be thinking, will he do it again on something else? And then putting you on the back burner. That is a legitimate thing that you have to consider, especially if you see he's putting several different things in front of you and stuff like that. All right. So hopefully that answers that question and gives you some juicy insight around that and stuff like that. All right. And I got some more private messages that came through. Da 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 da. Okay. And do that there. And so the private ones, I'm not going to read those out and everything else. All right. So ladies, like I said, for this week, for those ladies that do sign on and hop on into the Love Goddess group coaching program that starts 2 weeks from today, the bonus, the extra bonus, because there is a bonus. If you go to the Love Goddess page, there is a bonus that all of the participants are going to receive, which is my Art of Dating, right? Well, this particular bonus, which is my Spoiled Girlfriend program, that is only going to be given to 10 ladies that register by the end of this week. And that program alone is $1,000 value right there alone. So ladies, with that, with everyone, thank you so much for being with me here tonight. And next week, we are going to be focusing on lesson number 4 next week, which is about putting it all together. It's about that complete package and everything else, but we're also going to be talking more about prosperity consciousness. We're going to be talking about money, honey, and things of that nature. So remember the 3 top reasons relationships fail? Well, this is how I structured the program so you can deal with that. So in next week, we're going to be talking more about prosperity consciousness versus lack consciousness so that you can attract a high quality man of means, right? So you no longer have to buy a man's love, but it is love that they will want to spoil and treat you like a queen. So everybody, with that, everybody, I want to say thank you so much for being here on lesson number 3 about the 4 keys of mental seduction so you can stay on a man's mind. And with that, namaste, and you have a good night. Bye-bye.